relatively small dispute between neighbours left to fester and then it turns ugly. It's just one example of the kind of dispute that could be resolved by mediation with the Community Justice Centre here in the Northern Territory. You and I have been learning about the work the centre does and the way it could help to improve your life here. Claire Cohen is the practice manager at the Darwin Centre. Claire, hello, welcome back.
Hey, Adam. Thank you.
And we've also got a participant who has participated in mediation. I'm going to call her Jane this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
So I'm going to start with you, Claire. For those who haven't heard of the series so far, can you remind us of what sort of matters you see as a mediator here in the Northern Territory?
Thanks, Adam. So a whole range. I think that's one of the strengths of the Community Justice Centre. We have matters like the one we just heard now about dogs and barking and noise and fences and trees. So we have neighbourhood matters like that. We also have matters that are referred to us by the court. So like personal violence restraining orders. We provide support for people who are going through that process. And then there's matters that are not necessarily mediation, but we occasionally are working on things like restorative justice as well, and complex matters where sometimes there might have been a complaints process, and instead of going into the really pointy-end, hardline arbitration around that, people put a pause on that and come to mediation.
Just to avoid the courts and the expenses and everything else that goes along with that.
Exactly that, and I think as well to have a different type of process where the outcome actually belongs to the people in the room rather than somebody else making that decision.
As we've been looking with a number of the studies that you do or some of the cases that you do, we have to be quite careful about what we're involved with here. So we're going to be quite vague about these things, but we're going to look at our first case study today. What can you tell us about the background to this particular case?
So our participants coming in today to talk about concerns that were between two community groups in a local town, and it had got to the point where communication had really broken down and there was a lot of conflict. And so they rang the Community Justice Centre because they were struggling to work it out between themselves and really wanted that independent, impartial third person because it was impacting on the community and impacting on the work that they do.
And I guess one of the challenges when you're doing this mediation is that both parties agree to go into mediation in the first place. In this situation, was that a keen avenue that both of the parties wanted to do?
Yeah, exactly, Adam. So I think mediation's voluntary. So really, unless people are willing to come into that process, we're not able to go ahead. And in this instance, people really saw the value of we want to keep doing what we do. We don't want to be in conflict with one another. We really value what we bring to the community. So that definitely brought people.
How do you go about the challenge, though? The Northern Territory is a small place. Yep. People know each other's business, particularly if you've got some special interest. There's not that many people that share your special interest, so everybody's going to know things. How do you go about that mediation when, the wider community of those people involved in it are probably all fully aware of what's going on? Or
Again, I think that's a really good point. We talked, when Andy and I were talking about mediation at the beginning of this series, we talked about confidentiality. That's kind of one of the key pillars of mediation. It's voluntary, it's confidential, and mediators aren't making decisions for people. And so people, when they come into the mediation process, agree to confidentiality and they sign off on that. Now, that doesn't mean nothing that happens in the mediation is shared. It just means everybody in that mediation decides who can know what.
Well, let's bring in Jane. And again, I'll just reiterate that we want to be quite vague about the case so that we're not highlighting or identifying anybody particularly. But Jane, tell me about your emotional state before you entered that mediation and then when you go into the mediation. How did you feel about that?
So obviously it was something that was, it was a conflict that we couldn't kind of deal with on our own. And so when mediation was suggested, both parties we were definitely keen to resolve the issue. So in the beginning, I was quite emotional. It wasn't something that I felt like I could deal with alone. So it was really great to have that support. And then when we had the mediation, like it was awesome. We were able to talk about it. We were able to see both sides with the story, and then we realised it was just like a big miscommunication. So the result was so great, and we were able to go back out and do our thing.
Yeah, so that's a good result. But I imagine when you were entering that mediation, was there a bit of a black and white feeling, though, that the other party's doing the wrong thing? I've been wronged by the other party. Did you feel anxious about it?
Yeah, I did, and I did. I personally, I did feel that way. But like I said, when you get to sit down in mediation in a situation like that, it's really great because you do get to see both sides of the story, and then you kind of realise maybe I looked at it a certain way, or maybe I just misunderstood. And then, you both come to an agreement. It's important that you get to see each other's sides without the emotions, and I think it was a really great setting to be able to do that.
How long did that process take? Did you have a number of meetings through that mediation?
So we were lucky enough to be able to resolve our conflict in just one sitting, which was really great. Yeah, we had a really great outcome. And the thing about it is, prior to going into mediation, I didn't think we would resolve it at all. I just thought there's no way we're going to get past this. We were very lucky. I think it was about a 3-week process. And that was obviously dealing with the conflict and then being referred to mediation, and then finally sitting down with a mediator.
And so did you meet separately beforehand in that terms of that process? Did you meet separately and say, here are my grievances, here's the situation, then presumably the other team does the same thing, and then you come together? Is that how it worked?
So I received a call from the mediator. I'm not too sure what the other...
Yeah.
They got, and then we just, there was a date set, and we just came together. And then we were offered a support person each, which was really great. By the end of the mediation, it was so beautiful that we had our support people. They were praying, and it was just a really great outcome.
Oh. And so, and so the repercussions of that, I mean, it's a highly tense situation. Mediators can only do so much. How are you now after that whole experience? Is it great?
It's great. It's definitely something that it's an experience that I'll remember forever. And it also gave me tools to deal with situations in my life a little bit better. So, yeah, I think for me, it was such a great experience. It was great support and something there just between the conflict and how we could resolve that, yeah.
And this sounds like a no-brainer for a question. Would you recommend mediation to others?
Absolutely. Especially for, it's very hard when you go into conflict. The emotional intelligence gets tested and stuff like that. I think mediation is a really great tool to have, and it's a great support too. So, yeah, absolutely.
Well, good on you, Jane. Thank you so much for sharing your story today. I'm glad that it's all ended up so well, particularly after one mediation. Were you in tears when you walked out the door in the end?
Yes, we were. And actually, my support person was quite emotional about it too, yes.
Oh, that sounds beautiful. Good on you, Jane. Thank you so much for sharing your story today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So, Jane there, Claire, that sounded like a mediation where an agreement was reached. What about mediations where agreements can't be reached? What happens to some... Well, actually, we'll just start with that. That's a great story, I guess, of what happens, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think as Jane shared, there was a real value for everybody coming to the table, that what matters to us is going to be worth the cost of trying to work this out. So I think Andy and I have shared this before, that when the pain of things or the cost of things staying the way they are becomes more than the cost or effort of actually bringing some shift, then people are really ready to do something about that. And these mob work.
Yeah, and what Jane said in that, which is what I've sort of been learning over this period that we've been discussing what the Community Justice Centre does and the purpose of mediation, is that those tools can then be used by the people, by the participants in their everyday life.
Yeah, exactly. And Jane mentioned, she had a call with the mediator, and everyone coming into mediation, as we've shared, does have a preparation time. And part of that is doing some coaching, helping people to go, hey, what's happening for you? What do you think has triggered that for you? What really matters? And then, as Jane said, we really support people. What's your best guess about what's happening on the other side? What's happening with the other people?
So they can consider. What happens when people can't reach an agreement? Why don't some people reach agreements?
Well, often that's because the gap between what people are really willing to walk away with, what's going to be of value for them, is too great. So what we say to people when we're mediating is we never promise agreement, because as mediators we don't do that. It's the people in the room. But what we do say is you're going to get more clarity on what matters, just as Jane shared. They had an opportunity to really hear each other and understand better what was going on. So it's always a guarantee in mediation that people are going to have a better sense of, hey, what happened for them? What were they thinking? What was motivating them? What did they care about?
Yeah, and I'm sure there's cases where that happens, where you go, no, the agreement can't be reached, and then people take some time to mull over what they've heard, what the other people's experiences are, and then they can come back to the table maybe a month later, 2 weeks later.
Yeah, exactly. And we've just had a case like that. Where there were people living in close residence with one another. There were some challenges with a service provider that they were connected with. They had one mediation, and it brought a lot of clarity to all the issues on the table. And then people actually went away and got some advice and some more information and thought about it, came back to the table and were able to reach agreement.
Well, Claire, it's lovely to see you. We'll see you again soon. Thank you.
No worries, thanks.
Claire Cohen, who is the practice manager at the Darwin Centre at the Community Justice Centre. Is that what we're calling it? Yeah, that's what we're calling it. You are on ABC Radio Darwin, right across the Northern Territory. If you want some more information about the Community Justice Centre, because it does operate right across the Northern Territory, it does have facilities everywhere, whether you're in the centre or the top end of the Northern Territory, you can call us 1300 057 222 and we'll put you in touch there. It is 25 to 11. Look at the time. Robots that seek and destroy mozzies sounds like an invention that would sell like hotcakes.